Good evening, everyone. I hope my voice is audible and screen are visible to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. तर आज आपण स्प्रिंग बूटचं प्रॅक्टिकल म्हणजे स्प्रिंग ॲप्लिकेशन कशा पद्धतीने तयार करायचं याचं एक फंडामेंटल प्रॅक्टिकल बघणार आहोत. जेणेकरून तुम्हाला आयडिया येईल की स्प्रिंग बूट ॲप्लिकेशन तयार करताना कुठल्या गोष्टी महत्त्वाच्या आहेत. तर सुरू करू. ओके. तर हे पहा, मला स्प्रिंग बूट ॲप्लिकेशन तयार करायचं. आता हे स्प्रिंग बूट ॲप्लिकेशन तयार करताना 2 पद्धती आपण वापरतो. एक, आपण डायरेक्टली मॅवन प्रोजेक्ट तयार करून त्यामधून स्प्रिंग बूट ॲप्लिकेशन तयार करू शकतो किंवा स्प्रिंग बूटच्या वेबसाईटवर प्रोजेक्ट्समध्ये स्प्रिंग इनिशियलायझर नावाचा एक प्रोजेक्ट आहे. व्हॉट्स अ प्रोजेक्ट? स्प्रिंग इनिशियलायझर. तर या स्प्रिंग इनिशियलायझर मधून आपण नवीन प्रोजेक्ट तयार करू शकतो. When you open a Spring Initializer, it's have number of modules. That means it's have a project that what build automation you are going to use. And we are familiar with Maven. So Maven we are use. The Spring Initializer are support multiple languages. That means Java, Kotlin, and Groovy. So we can go with the Java. Currently, currently, which version we are used to develop a Spring application? That's version 3.5.3. So that version we are going to use. Here, we need to add our project metadata. So first one is a group ID, that's a com.example. The artifact ID, we are familiar with the CURD operation for employee. So we can start with the employee CURD operation. That name is employee CRUD. I have multiple employee CRUD operations, so I just make the things different. Employee CRUD, EMP CRUD. The description of project, that's a demo project for Spring Boot. We have a package name that's automatically created. The packaging, we are use a jar. And the version of our Java, that's a 21. So that all settings are set within pom.xml file. Now, we need to add dependency. Spring framework provide number of models, and using that models, we are develop our application. So here we need to discuss some basic model. So that's the model we need to add here. To click add dependency. आता इथे बघा, जेव्हा आपण ऍड डिपेंडन्सीला क्लिक करतो, बेसिक मॉडेल्स आपल्याला पाहिजे जेणेकरून आपण एक स्प्रिंगचं ऍप्लिकेशन तयार करू शकू. तर सगळ्यात आधी वेब. Spring Web is a model from Spring, and using that Spring Web model, we can develop a web application including RESTful API. That application we are develop using one design pattern, and that design pattern is a Spring Model View Control MVC. So we need to add it. So it's added. After that, when we are develop any project, we require a database, and that database is a PostgreSQL. So we require PostgreSQL driver. So just add PostgreSQL driver. After that, to interact with that database, we need to use ORM. And to use ORM, we are use one a project that's a Jakarta persistent, right? So JPA API we required. So that's why JPA. Its model name is Spring Data JPA. It's include Hibernate with a Jakarta persistent API. So it's added. After that, there are a number of dependency we have. After these basic application, we required to use a security, but security currently I'm not added here. To monitor and to restart my server when I change on my code, I required one another model that's a Spring Dev Tools. Spring Dev Tools. So that's a basic model I added here to create my first application from a Spring. And when added that frameworks, that models, just click to generate button. Just click to generate button. It's a generated and download one zip file. Let's open that zip file, extract it. So I'm going to extract my zip file with the WinRAR, extract here. It's extracted, right? It's extracted. Once it's extract, I want to open that application using Eclipse. So currently I'm use a Spring Tool Suite. That's version is a 4. So using that Eclipse ID, I just open a projects from file system. Select your project. It's available within a downloads, right? So move to downloads. And that's my project. So let's open that directory, which directory holding SRC folder. So that's the directory I'm selected. And after that, let's finish. So that's a simple way to create your project with Spring Initializer. So is any question there? Did you notice that how to create a project with a Spring Initializer? Okay, that's good. So once you open your project with a Eclipse ID, look here at downside. It's a download a source for our Spring library. So we will wait till it's download. It's at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%. So it will be increased. It's depend on your internet connection. Okay, it's done. Once that downloading is done, let's open pom.xml file. Look here, it's a generated pom.xml file. It's having version of Spring Boot 3.5.3. That's your artifact ID. That's your group ID. It's a version. It's a name of your application. That's a description of your application. And at the below side, you use a Java version. That's a 21. And dependency, it's added from version 3.5.3. That's a dependencies. So we required a Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. It's from group ID Spring Framework.boot. We are added web module. We are added a dev tools. and we are added the driver for PostgreSQL. So that dependency we have within our POM file. Once we are check our POM file, then we need to move into resources. Look here, resources is there. Within a resources, there are three things are available. One is a static. Say static is a folder. Templates is a folder. And there are one file. That file name is application.property. Within a static a folder, we can store our static files like if our application required images, if our application required CSS or JS, that all things we are stored within a static folder. After that, template folder is there, templates. That templates folder holding the HTML files. Templates folder holding HTML files. After that, we have an application.property file. That application.properties file holding a configuration regarding our project. So that's a holding configuration regarding our project. So let's start to configure our project to use a database. But before that, I want to check again. Is my voice is audible and screen are visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so what are the things we need to configure? Look here. To configure our first Spring project, that's our project name, application name. That's the EMP card. And after that, if you want to run our project on a specific port on server, then we need to add server dot port. And I'm going to use 8082. That's a port number to execute my application. After that, we need to add database credentials. Database have a URL, username, and password. That all things we need to add using Spring data source. What? Spring data source. So Spring dot data source. And from Spring dot data source, first we require URL. First, I need to add URL. Look here, we are use a port number. It's depend on your application. That means if you are develop number of applications and that application you are deploy on a single server, then you need to change your port number. By default, if you are not write that port, then it's accept default port that is a 8080. Now, a Spring data source we need to add. So we can copy that Spring data source and other credentials from our previous project. So my database is employee DB. Let's enter a new line. Now I need to add a Spring data source username. And that username we have that's the Postgres. Next line. Now we require a password to connect a database. So that's why string dot data source dot password. And my password is 123. Okay, done. Now we are use a specific driver for our database. So that's why I'm use a Spring dot data source dot driver class name and that driver class name is or dot PostgreSQL dot driver. That's my driver class name. Done. Now the next thing. When we are develop a database application, we are use a JPA with Hibernate. So that's why we need to set Hibernate settings. To set Hibernate within a properties file, we are use a Spring, and Hibernate we are use with the JPA. So JPA dot Hibernate, and here I set a schema to create a tables. That's a auto, and its a values update. After that, when my application are execute, I need to check what's the SQL that application are use at background. So to check that things on console, I need to add one another property, that Spring dot JPA dot show SQL, and its value is a true. So whenever our application are execute and it's a converted object into SQL, that SQL query we can check on console using that property. So hope you are understand that basic configuration. Is any doubt from that basic configuration? '8082, it's not fixed port number. We are use that port number here. If you are don't want to use that port number, you can leave it alone. That means don't write it port server dot port line. So it will be used a default port, that is 8080. Line number 7. What is the line number 7? Okay. When we are use Hibernate, we have some properties. That property is what? The schema property. How our tables will be executed. So here we are use that schema property. That's update. That means update value. That means what? If we have existing tables and we don't want to remove that table data, then we are use update. If you want to create a new one every time when we are when our application are execute, then we are use a create. So maximum time we need to save our data. So to secure that data and to avoid a removation, we are use update. So current data we have as it is, and from next rows we are updating our data. So that's why we are use that 7 number line. Is any other question? Okay, so I hope you are get that all things, the basic things how we can configure our Spring application using application.properties file. Once you are created application configure your application. After that, we have main folder within our Java package. So open that Java package. Within that Java package, we have our project package, that is a com.example employee code. Within that package, we have one class. That class name is AMP code application. So within that class, we have main method, and that main method execute a Spring application thread. What? It's execute Spring application thread. So our that file, that class is the entry point for our application, and that entry point we are denoted using @ Spring Boot application annotation. So is it clear? Which dependency we need to add when we are creating Spring project using Spring Initializer? The first one is a web, Spring Web. Second one is a Spring Data JPA. Third one is a PostgreSQL driver. The fourth one is DevTools. So that 4 dependencies, fundamental dependency to create any web application. Is any other question there? Okay. Okay. Let's next. Once. Do not use Java 24. Look here. To create a Spring project, we are use a Spring Initializer, right? And to use a Spring Initializer, we need to open start.spring.io, that URL. Once you are open that URL, there are number of things. That means which build automation tool you are use. That's Maven. The language is Java. Spring Boot app version is a 3.5.3. That's your group ID. Artifact ID you need to enter. After that, you need to select packaging. That's a jar. Currently, Spring framework are supported Java 24, Java 21, and Java 17. And we are selected 21. We are select 21. After that, we need to add dependency. And how we can add dependency? Using click a button, add dependencies. So here we are added dependency Spring Web, PostgreSQL driver, Spring Data JP, and Spring Boot DevTools. And after that, click to generate file. It's a downloaded one zip file. Extract that zip file and open that extracted folder within your Eclipse tools with a Spring Toolsuite version 4. So I hope that basic things are covered. Can we move? Okay. Now we need to perform a CRUD operation, right? So to perform CRUD operation, we need one class. That class actually interact with the data, and that class is entity class. So we need to create one entity class. So within our package employee CRUD, I'm going to create one class. That class name is entity class. So that's the class name is employee. That's the entity class. So we are use employee, and let's click to finish. So it's created entity class. And how we can declare entity class? Using annotation. @entity, right? Now I want to use a table. That table name is a customized. So that's why I need to use one another annotation. That is a table. And that table name is EMP details we have, right? So EMP CRUD. That table name I select. So entity, it's a belong from Jakarta persistent. The table, it's belong from Jakarta persistent. Once we are set that things. Now we need to set a number of columns using the class fields, and that's a private. So private long EMP ID. That's my first field. After that, a private string EMP name. That's my second field. Private string EMP email. That's the third one. Okay, that's enough. So here we are using three fields. Now, if you are not use any @ column annotation, then it's a created that's a field as a columns. But I want to use some customized things. That means I want to give us some names and I want to set a primary key with auto generation. So that's why I use @ID. So when we are using @ID, the current field is a primary key. So that primary key is defined. Now I want to make it auto increment. So that's what generated value. That value is have a one strategy as a argument, and that strategy generation type is identity. Okay, now whatever column I'm use, I want to define custom name. So that's why I use @column, and that column name argument I need to define. That's my name EMP_ID. That's my column name. Now, next thing, I have second column. That name is EMP name. So I need to define some custom name. So @column, and it's a name equal to it's employee, or I can use only name. Okay. Now let's define next column name @column. @column. That's the name, and it's email. Okay. So I define a custom name. With that custom name, I don't accept any null value. So for that reason, within a column, I set second argument. So comma, second argument is a nullable. And that nullable is a false. So I don't want to any null value within my columns. So I need to set it as a second argument for column annotation. It's done, right? After that, employee have a salary. So I'm going to use one another things at the rate column. That's the next column. It's name. Name is salary. Name is a salary, and that column. For that column, we are use precision. So precision. That's a precision is 10, and the scale is 2. So what is that precision and scale? Look here. That precision defines the total number of digits that can be stored in a column, including both the digits before and after the decimal point. So we are set precision tens means total number of 10 digits allow for the column. It's a 10. And scale we are defined. So scale defines the number of digits to the right of the decimal point. And that's a scale we are defined to. That means there can be 2 digits after decimal point. So that's the meaning of that precision and scale. Now let's use private. So we require float number, right? So instead float number, we can use big decimal from java.math. Big decimal, and that big decimal name is a salary. Okay. So we have created our entity class. Now, within that class, what the things we have? We have a empty constructor, because that Hibernate are required that empty non-parameterized constructor. So let's create a non-parameterized constructor. That's a non-parameterized constructor. After that, we required one parameterized constructor. If we are initialize value by object, then we required it. So we can use that things also. So it's a parameterized constructor. If we are initialize object with the constructor, then we require that things. Otherwise, we have setter and getter methods to set and get values for object. So using that setter methods also, you can set values for a object. So let's create getter and setter methods. Okay. After that, we have object, right? That's an employee object. That means when we are create class, it's that class are manipulate using data using object. So that's why to show object value, we required a toString method. So that toString method we are override here from object class. So that's a toString method. To check equality of two objects, we required one another override method from object class. That override method is hash code and equals method. There are two methods are generated. Okay. So that hash code are provide hash value for our object, and equals method are useful to check equality in between two objects. And that method we are override from object class. And object is a root class for Java, right? So that's our entity class. It's also called model class. So is any question regarding entity class? Is any question regarding entity class? Line number 14. Okay. Look here, when we are using entity annotation, that particular class is declared as an entity class. That means it's responsible to handle a data and to create a data. That means create a table. But when we are create a table, I don't want to use employee name. I don't want to use employee name. If we are not use @table, it's assign a table name that's an employee. But I want to use some custom name. So that's why I use a @table, @table annotation, and given a name is employee CRUD. So our table name is what? Employee CRUD, not an employee. If we are not use that @table, our table name is employee. That's a line number 14. And after that, what's the next question? Okay. It's regarding equals method. Look here, when we are write any application within a Java, there are one parent class. It's a super parent class. It's also called root class. That root class defines some methods like to generate hash code, to check equality of two objects, uh, to assign object value using two string methods. So that's a methods are defined within object class. We require to use that method for our own purpose. Why? Because we have some fields. We need to show that object value from that fields. That means variables. So that's why we need to override those methods. And here we are use equals method or override. So equals method are compare two objects, that two objects have a similar things or not, or share same memory or not. That things we are check or compare using equals method. So that method already defined within object class, and object class is the root class of Java. That means every class is inherited by object class implicitly. So that's why we are override that equals method. After that, okay, override methods are clear. Line number 17. Okay, look here. I'm going to explain from line 60. When we are create any table, we require one primary key, right? That primary key is useful to make unique identification of rows from our table. And here we are make that things using one annotation @ID. After that, that primary key I want to auto increment. To auto increment that primary key, we need to use one another annotation that's a @generated value. And that @generated value holding one argument that's the name is a strategy. And that argument name, argument value is identity. Is a identity. So it's a indicate that persistent provide must assign primary keys for entity using database and identity column. So there are number of values are there for generation type uh, there are auto, identity, sequence, table, UUID, and class. That means we can create a new class for generate identity. But here we are use identity. So it's indicate the persistent provider must assign primary keys for entity. So our primary key is auto incremented there. Is any other question? So I hope you understand the entity class. When we are develop, there are another question why we are using nullable. When we are develop or create any table, most of time we don't want to create a table with a null value. That means empty rows. To avoid that empty rows or null values, we are use one argument from column annotation, that's a nullable, and it's accept only boolean value, either true or either false. If we are write a true, it's accept null values, that our table will be accept null values, otherwise it's a false. To use a foreign key, we are use a relationship, one to many, many to one, one to one, many to many. That's a relationship. When we are use, then we are use a foreign key, and we are use that relationship within our one Hibernate example. That's a region table and countries table. So there we are use the relationship one to one. So only that annotation you need to add at the rate one to one or one to many. Then your that particular column or field is reference field or foreign key. So when we are use entity, that it's too much easy to create a table without writing raw SQL queries. So is any other question? Is any other question? Okay, so let's move. So now we are create an entity, right? And using that entity, we need to perform CURD operation. And to manipulate that data, we have entity class. But to perform CURD operation, we are use Hibernate. And Hibernate provide some methods. Using that methods, it is a possible without write some raw methods or some boilerplate code, we can easily save a data within our database, retrieve a data from a database. So for that reason, we are learn within Hibernate, we are use JPA instead use Hibernate native API. So now we are going to create one interface, which interface are used that JPA functionality. So that's why I'm going to create one interface new. It's an interface, and that interface name is employee repository. Employee repository. Let's switch. Okay. So we have one employee repository. That employee repository responsible to perform the CRUD operation. That means that repository are given us a methods. That methods belong from JPA. So that's why we need to define that interface is a repository interface. So it's a repository. It's a repository. Once we are defined that interface is a repository, then whatever methods we need to use here to perform a data manipulation, that methods are holding by JPA repository. So that's what we need to extend JPA repository, JPA repository. It's an interface, and that interface is a generic type interface. So first Generate type is we want to perform operation on employee entity, right? So employee, that's the entity name I write here. And second things is ID. So within our employee entity, we have ID. That's a type is long. So that long type I'm used here as a ID. Okay. Now it's done. So the employee repository, it is an interface that extends JPA repository. It is a part of Spring Data JPA framework, which provides an abstraction layer over the database access code. So it's allowing you to work with the database in more efficient and less boilerplate code. So what is the purpose to use it? JPA repository are provide some methods. That method's name is save, find by ID. Instead save, now we are use persist, find by ID. That's a find by ID retrieve an entity by its ID. Find all, that methods retrieve all entities from the database. Delete by ID, it's a delete the entity with the given ID. And if you want to check that ID is available or not, then exist by ID method is there. So that JPA repository provide number of methods that work with the JPA entities like employee, and use the entity's primary key type, that's a long in our case, for the perform CERD operation. So that's the purpose of employee repository. So JPA repository, it's useful to automatic query generation. That means you don't need to write the implementation code for CERD operation, as they are provided by Spring Data JPA. You can still define custom methods for more complex query using method naming conventions, or custom JPQL. That's name is stand for Java Persistent Query Language queries. When we are use JPA repository, it's provide consistency. That means it's ensure that transaction management, session management, and exception handling are handled consistently across the application. And for that reason, we need to use JPA repository. Okay. Is any question regarding JPA repository? Look here, we are not implement any method. That all methods which is a predefined within a JPA repository, that methods we are going to use here. Is any question regarding JPA repository? Okay, so let's move. Once you are create a repository, after that, the next thing is to create a service. So that's why I'm going to create one new class. New class. That class name is what we can write, employee service. That's a class. And we are going to create that class. Okay. So within that class, actually we are provide service methods. So that employee service class encapsulate business logic, maintains separation of concerns, and provides modular, reusable, and testable way to manage application operations. That's why we are using that service class. So we need to define that class is a service. So that's why at the rate service. I define that. After that, within my class, I want to make a dependency injection. that injection is what we have employee repository interface. So I need to inject that thing. So that's why I'm use @AutoWire. AutoWire. That's annotation. And that AutoWire inject one instance. That instance belong from repository. That name is EMP repo. Huh? Okay. EMP repo. Okay. Okay. So I created one instance and that's a final. So when we are create a final instance, then that instance we need to initialize either constructor or either static block. So here I'm going to create constructor to initialize that particular instance. So okay, so I create constructor here, right? So now it's initialize that particular instance. So once we are initialize that instance, after that we need to use repository methods to perform our CRUD operation, right? So let's fetch. Let's fetch EMP by ID. And for that reason, I use a public. I create one method. It's a return employee, and a get employee by ID. Get employee by ID. And what's the ID we have? Long type ID we have. That's the ID. Look here. Now that method, it's a custom method, which I'm right to get employee by ID. Within that method, I invoke that built-in method, which is provided by JPA repository. So that's why it's a return employee repository, employee repo dot find by ID, find by ID. Okay. So we are get that particular employee. But if that ID is not available, then it's given error. So we need to handle that things also, right? So for that reason, I can use dot or else method from our repository, or else it's optional, or else return null. Okay, done. So we are fetch employee by ID, and that method we are invoke from our repository. That's repository instance is EMP repo. After that, let's write method for fetch all employees. So let's create one generic method. Not generic method. We can create one method that return number of values from our table. So we need one list. So list is capable to store multiple values, right? It's a collection framework interface. So return list, and what kind of values we require? Employee values. Employee values we require. Employee is our entity class. And after that, the method name is a get all employee. So here we are right, get all employee, and it's a return a list. return emp repo dot we need to get all things, right? So find all methods are there. Find all methods are there. So we retry invoke that find all methods from JPA repository. From JPA repository. It's done. So we are fetch all employees. After that, to add a new employee, I can use one another method. So add new EMP, and for that reason, I'm going to write something different. Okay, so let's create one public method. Public, we need to add within our database. So not required any return void, and add emp. It's a method name. It's my custom method. That method invoke the method. It's belong from JPA repository. So emp repo, that's the instance we are created. Dot persist dot save, and it's a save employee. So we required one entity object here to save data. Done. Right? So save method is available within JPA repository. After that, the next thing, if you want to update employee, then I'm going to create one custom method. And that method name is a public. It's not written anything, and it's a update EMP. And that EMP I need to provide which EMP I want to update. Okay, so EMP repo dot the method is we are updating, right? So same method we are use save. It's a EMP. So using that method, we can update the current employee. After that, once we are update, we need to delete the specific employee by their ID. So that's why I create one another method public. It's not written anything. Delete employee is a method name, and it's accept ID. That is a long type. And here we are use emp repo dot delete by ID. Delete by ID, and it's a ID. That ID will be deleted. So here we are use a methods. That methods belong from JPA repository, and that methods we are invoke within our custom methods. So here we are use some class annotation, that is @ service. That is @ service. So it marks the class as a service component in the Spring application contents. It is a specialization of the component annotation, and it's used to indicate that the class hold business logic, and Spring will automatically detect it during component scanning and register it as a bin. So that's a @ service. After that, we are use @AutoWire, right? So that AutoWire, we are already discussed that things yesterday. It injects the employee repository dependency into employee service. So Spring will provide an instance of employee repository when creating an instance of employee service. So that's why we are using @AutoWire. So it's a dependency injection. So that things we are right here. Is any question there? Okay, there are question or else none. Okay, look here. We are getting employee by some specific ID, but if that ID is not present within our table, then our application will be crash. Instead, to crash that application, I can use or else. So I'm given one alternate path to execution of that get by employee ID method. So if there are not have that particular ID, then it will be written null value. So that's why I'm use or else. @service @AutoWire I'm already explore. Okay, the persist. Okay, why when we are use Hibernate with a JPA, we are use a persist method. But when we are use JPA with a Spring application, we are use a save method. Look here, that all modules belong from Spring. That's customized models. That means they are taken Hibernate and create their own models for particular use. So when we are use a JPA repository from a Spring, then instead persist, we are use save method, and that's a customization from Spring framework. So is it clear, Rohit?
Yes, sir.
Is any other question? Is any other question regarding service? Okay, I summarize these things once again. We are create employee service class. That class encapsulate business logic. It maintains separation of concerns and provides modular, reusable way to manage application operations. So here, within that class, we are defined one instance from our repository. Why it's from our repository? Look here, when we are develop any application, we require some built-in functionality. That built-in functionality help us to get a data from database, to save a data into database, to get a specific data from a database, and that all functionality right within JPA repository. So within a JPA repository, we have number of methods. That methods we need to invoke here. But most of time when we are write our application, we require some custom methods. For example, if you want to get employee by ID, so get employee by ID, it's not a JP repository method. We need to create it. So for that reason, we need to extend JPA repository with one another interface. That's a employee repository interface. So that's the purpose of employee repository interface. After that, simply I create a custom method. That's a get employee by ID. So that's holding one argument. It's a long ID. So whatever ID we are provide, that's the data will be written, and that data will be written by our repository interface instance. our repository instance dot find by ID method. That find by ID method, that all methods given by JPA repository only. So we are not write any logic to get that ID. We are not write any query to perform that operation. Simply, we are invoke built-in methods. And when we are use that built-in methods, our operation is more easy. So that's the explanation for that service class. So I hope it's done. What's the JPA repository? We can use JPA repository directly without extend it when we don't have any customized method. But maximum application have a customized method. For example, if you want to get a employee by ID, then we need to implement that method within our repository. So that's why it is a recommended practice. Do not use JPA repository directly. You can create one another interface, and that interface extend JPA repository. So in the future, if you want some customized method, then you can write that method within your interface. I hope that all questions are resolved. If still you have any doubt, please ask me. Is any doubt there? Okay. So now our repository is ready. Our service class is ready. Our entity class is ready. Now we need to perform the operation which are control our service class and uh, entity class. So that's the MVC model view control pattern. So here we are going to use MVC. So for that reason, I need to create one controller. So it's a new class. That's the employee controller. That's the employee controller. That's the employee controller, right? Let's finish. Okay. So there are two ways to use a controller. That means if we are use Angular in our future, then we need to create REST API. But if you are use a standalone web application, then REST controller is not useful there. So instead REST controller, we can use simple controller @controller. Okay. So that's a define @controller. So there are one question that's explain model view control. Look here, that model view control, it's a pattern, design pattern. So model means what? The entity class. That entity class are able to interact with the data. That's a model. View. Currently, we are not write any view because to write view, we need to create first controller. That controller are manage model and view. So that's why first we need to write controller, and after controller, we need to write views. So that views are controlled by employee controller. And what's the views? Views are HTML files. Views are JSON data. So currently we are not use a REST controller. We are use a simple controller. That means we are going to use HTML files to display or manipulate our data. So is it clear? MVC pattern. Okay. Next. So we are going to write controller. What is the meaning of @control? It's a provide that means it's a mark our class, that employee controller class, as a Spring MVC controller that enabling handle HTTP request, that enabling handle HTTP request. So that's why we are use @controller. After @controller, we need to map our URL. That means how it will be trigger. So that's why I use one another annotation, that @request mapping. Request mapping. And how I need to map that request. I need to provide one path when our application are execute, and when that controller want to execute with our application, I need to provide one URL, that is the EMP. So whenever employee, whenever that URL are provided on a browser, our controller will be start execution. So it's a request mapping employee. After that, we need to inject our service class instance, right? And for that reason, we required one annotation, that's auto-wire. And it's a inject one instance. That's a employee service instance, employee service. And it's a name, EMP service. Okay. So it's a final, right? So we need to initialize it. And we know that things. We can initialize final instance using constructor or static block. So here we are using constructor because whenever create object, it will be initialized. So source constructor are initialized, right? Sorry, EMP service are initialized. Once that's initialized, then we need to perform that all operation which we are defined within employee service. That's what is operations: get employee by ID, get all employees, say add employees, delete employees, update employees, right? So to perform that operation here, we need to create a methods. That methods are performed by HTTP. That means that methods are belong from HTTP methods. So how many HTTP methods are there? Let's check. Okay. So what is the HTTP? HTTP stand for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. To serve our pages over a network or over an internet, we required that protocol. So that protocol are provide some methods. That protocol provides some request method. So it's called HTTP request method. So we can request to a server using that method. So first method is a get. It's a get method request. Post method request. Put, it's update method request. Delete, it's using a delete resources. For that reason, we are using the delete method. So when we are use that HTTP methods, our server HTTP protocol are identify a particular operation are performed by that particular method. So that's why we are use that HTTP request method, and each and every programming language are inherit that HTTP request method within their implementation. So how Java will be Spring application will be do it? Let's see. Now, the first thing I want to display list of employees. I want to display list of employees. So let's see how it will be done. To display list of employee, that means we require to get retrieve data, right? And to retrieve data, we are use one HTTP request method, that is a get mapping. Get mapping. So it's a get method, and method name method is a public type. It's a return a string list emp, and here we need to interact with our entity class. That's class name is entity. For that reason, we are use a model. It's not belong from log back core. It's belong from UI, because I need to display that things. So model, it's an interface from Spring Framework UI, and its instance name is model. Okay. Now I need to return, right? So first thing, we need to set attribute for our model instance. So model dot set attribute, that's add attribute, and it's add attribute from from uh, from uh, from employees, from employee. It's a collection name, and the second argument is a emp service. We need to call that method. That method is what? Get all employees. So here we are set that things for model, and return return return. We need to return something, that's a string list em. What's our request mapping? Employee. It's a plural, and I am using singular word. Employees. Okay. Okay. So it's done. right? So we are create list employees, right? We are create list employees and get return that employees in a string. Now let's perform next operation. Uh, so next operation is what the things we required to add new employee. We required one form, right? That form is a HTML form. So we need to show form to register a new employee. And for that reason, I'm going to create one another method. It's belong from get mapping, because initially our form is empty, get mapping, and that get mapping are get mapping are mm, use a particular URL that's registered. Okay, done. Now let's create a method for that form. So it's a purpose only show register form. That's a empty form. Hmm? And it's holding model. It's a return string, but we require to insert a data when we are show form, right? So employee and we need to add it in within a model. Add what's the method? Add attribute. And we need to add employee. Right. After that, it's an employee belong from a URL. That's name is employees. And after that, it's a return a string. That string is we need to return string. That's a string is a register employee. That's it. Now we are showing only that form. Currently it's empty, not holding any data. Now we need to insert a data using that form. So for that reason, we need to use @post mapping. Post mapping. So post mapping is a method, and that method is a public. It's a return string. @model attribute. It's a model attribute. It's a employee. So we have used a model attribute employee. Okay. So we need to return that. Dot save what's method we are right. Add in. So it's return redirect to employees. So we can get a list of employees. Okay. So it's enough for today, right? So I'm going to summarize that all things. To perform operation on views, I need one controller. That controller are manage a model, that means entity as well as views. So that's why I need one annotation. That's annotation is a controller. Within that controller are trigger with a specific URL. So that's why I need to trigger that controller. I'm use @request mapping, and that's my controller name is employee controller. Within that controller, I inject one dependency using @AutoWire. That dependency is employee service instance, because employee service instance holding that all business logic which we want to perform for CERD operation. After that, we need to initiate that instance. So it's initiate within a constructor. Once we are initiate that things, we need we need to use we need to use to perform operation. That's a list employee. So to list employee, we need to create one HTML. Within that HTML, we need to provide one object which is a hold all the values from our table. So that's why I create one method list employee and return one string. It's a holding argument model. It's an interface that defines a holder for model attributes. So we need to add attributes within our model. So model dot add attribute. That attributes is employee, and employee, that attributes we are get. That means whatever attributes we are passed, it's a get from one method, that service instance dot get all employee. And after that, we need to return list employee. We need to return list employee. That's the object we need to return. After that, I write one method, that's a register. So it's a show register form. It's handle get request to employees register. It's initialize a new employee object and add it to a model. It's return the name of a template, whatever template we are going to use here. That's a register employee for registering a new employee. For registering a new employee. After that, we need to save employee, right? To save employee, we are use a post mapping request. And that post mapping request URL, I need to set that URL is I will use its add or save. Set. Okay. I will use it save. So that post mapping request, it's useful to save a new employee. So here it's a handle post request with that specific save URL. It save a new employee using service layer and redirects to our employees URL to display the updated list of employees. So that things we are right here within our controller. Okay. So let's move to question answers. How to remember? The first question is how to remember all the annotations. Look here. For remember that all annotation, you need to practice more. If you have created 2-3 applications, then of course, when you are develop fourth application, you always remember that annotations. Yes, I will provide that all file. It is a mandatory to use AutoWire. Look here. When we are use a Spring framework with a Spring Boot, we are not configure the things using XML. So there are annotations are there. That annotation provide a metadata for our compiler. So it is a necessary to use annotations. So it's a when you are use annotation, it's a avoid lots of boilerplate code. Yes, we are going to learn HTML, CSS, and JS with the same project. So is any question there? Is any question? Hope that all questions are resolved. Okay, why request mapping? Look here. When we are open a browser, suppose my application name is EMP CRUD, and it's holding 8082 port number. But when it's a trigger controller, when you are provide employees URL, then it's a trigger controller and perform that controller operations. So that's why we required to map that URL, we required request mapping at class level. I hope, Siley, you understand why we are user request mapping. Is any other question? Today we are not going to write any views part. It's a take more time. So today, let's summarize these things. What's today we are learn? Today we are learn how to create a Spring Boot project using Spring Initializer. After that, we are extracted that zip downloaded zip file and open it within a Spring tools. That Spring tool suite 4, that's Eclipse. After that, we are create entity. We are create property files first and configure our database with the JPA and Hibernate. After that, we are create entity file to interact a database. It's required. After that, we are create a repository interface. That means to manipulate data, whatever functions we are going to use, that all functions are provided by JPA repository. So that's why we are extend JPA repository within our interface. After that, to create a business logic, that means to perform operation, we are create one another layer, that's a service layer. And within a service layer, using our employee repository, we are perform the operation find by ID, find all. That means get all employees, to add employees within our database, and to data employees from our database. After that, whatever things we are updated, save, get, that all things we need to visualize. And to visualize that all things, we need to write HTML part. But currently we are not write HTML part, but we need to create controller. That controller are handle that HTML part, HTML and model part. So that's why I create one controller with annotation @controller. That controller are trigger with a specific URL. So that's why I need to write @request mapping URL, request mapping controller with a specific URL. So when I write that URL on my address bar of browser, then my controller will be trigger. Within that controller, whatever operation we are perform, that operation are performed with the service layer. So that's why service instance are created there. And service instance are initialized with a constructor of employee controller. Now, I want to display list of employee. To display list of employee, I write one method. That method are use one annotation get mapping. That means it's a use a get method from HTTP request. That get mapping that method name is a list employee and it's a return string. It's holding one argument that's a model instance of a model interface. And that instance I need to initialize using model.add attribute. So I'm going to add values for that instance, and that instance values is employee service, whatever things are written by employee service dot get all employee. That all things we are added here within a model. And now we need to return a object that's belong from string. So here we are return a list employee object, list employee object. So that's code a display list of employee within our HTML. Now, suppose we need to add new employee. For that reason, we need to show form first, right? That's a form is empty form, but that form are belong with a employee entity object. So that's why I create one new method that's using get mapping. It's a trigger when we are write register on URL on our address bar. It's a trigger, and within that model we are add attribute that is EMP. That's our object of our employee entity, and it's a return string that's a register employee. So that string we are used within our views part. That all strings, whatever returns, that's we are used within our views part, and iterate that return string to display the values. After that, the empty form are shown. Now we need to add employee within our database. So that's why we are use a post mapping request. That's a trigger when we are write save URL within our address bar, and it's invoke add employee from our service layer with a employee object, and it's after that once it's added that employee within a database, then we need to redirect to another URL. That URL are show the list of employees. So that's why I write redirect employees. So employees are show list of employees. So I hope you understand that things. Yes, we are using save for both update and insert operation. Now I'm going to upload yesterday's lecture first. Tomorrow lecture I will be upload to today's lecture. I will be upload tomorrow. Okay, it will be take time to upload that all things. What is the post mapping? Post mapping is a HTTP request method that handle post request. Suppose you want to transfer some data with a method, then you are use a post request. When you are get some data from a server with a request method, then you are use a get method. So post mapping you can use accordingly to set a data to a server. Get mapping you are use accordingly to get data from a server. So that's the difference between post and get mapping. Is any other question? So that all files I'm going, it's not completed today. That all files I'm going to share with you. That's first property file. That's a property file. After that, entity files we are create. That's the entity file. That's the entity file. After that, we are create repository. That's a repository interface file. After that, we are create the service layer. That's a service layer. After that, we are created a controller. That's a controller. So please note that files on your side. Yes, please share link. So tomorrow we are going to write a views part and modified our controller for update and delete. Arundhati, you are still use schema from Hibernate. Please update that line number 16 from Jakarta Persistent API. Okay, Arundhati, that's all okay. Just you need to update persistent.xml file, line number 16. Arundhati, you need to add these that highlighted line within your persistent file, configuration file. No, Unnati, that's your wrong project. That means the project it must be use a JPA. And JPA configuration, we are done with the persistent.xml file, not hibernate.config.xml file. Please note that things.
Okay, sir.
When we are use a JPA, we are use a entity manager factory, an entity manager instead session factory and session. So that things you need to alter that all codes. Maybe that all things are wrong.
Okay, sir.
That's Sushant. Okay, that's alteration are done, Sushant. Whatever things I'm suggested yesterday, that things I think it's done. Okay, line number 21 are updated. Okay, that's good, Sushant. Students, please be there. I'm going to take attendance. Okay. What's your name? Shreya. Shreya, you are properly configure your project with the persistent. हे पहा, आपल्याला कड ऑपरेशन परफॉर्म करताना किती कोड लिहावा लागत होता? तो सगळा कोड बॉयलर प्लेट कोड आपण अव्हॉइड करतो म्हणजे लिहित नाहीये जेव्हा आपण जीपीए वापरतो. म्हणजे आपलं काम किती सोपं होतं फ्रेमवर्क. Okay, that's good, Shreya. Please wait there. I'm going to take attendance.
Yeah.
Done. Okay. So, students, see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we are going to update views part from our code. So please update your project and submit your project with a field that Hibernate project form. Line number 12, Aditya. Sorry, line number 11. Aditya, you need to update line number 11. That means what the things I say for Arundhati, same things for you. You need to update line number 11 according to JPA. Okay, that's good. Just update persistent.xml file. Okay, that's updated. Arundhati, it's good. Let's submit your form. So, students, see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we are going to discuss the next part from our first application from Spring Boot. So I'm going to end this meeting here. Thank you very much to attending today's class. See you tomorrow. Samarth Thite. Please remove unnecessary part that's your use log4j. Just remove unnecessary part from resources. Other are perfect. Okay, so see you tomorrow with the same link, with the same time. Thank you very much.